It's time to have your say. Welcome back to the Q&A, answering your questions in the wrestling community. Ask SCW will begin straight after this. So welcome back, as always. Going to be answering your questions today on WWE and AEW. Such topics on the way. How can AEW improve their viewership? Should Sammy, Guevara and Conti go heel? Going to be giving some fantasy booking as well with Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre, how I would book that. Also, how I would end the brand split. Lacey Evans seems to be having a big change on her return to WWE TV. And also, the recent call-ups from NXT 2.0. How do I think they will fare? That will be the opening question here on today's show. But just before I start, if you want to be involved on the next Ask SCW, then drop a question in the comments section below. Leave the hashtag AskSCW. I know it's included in the next episode. You can also get involved on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All should be coming up on your screen right about now. But without further ado, then let's get on with our first question this week. And it comes from what I believe is a first-time asker in Kadrian Webb. Thank you for checking out Ask SCW. Asking, what's your expectations of the latest WWE call-ups? Great question to kick things off this week. Let's go for the names then that were called up from NXT to SmackDown. Starting off with Gunther. Of course, alongside him was Marcel Bartel. But of course, going by the new name going forward of Ludwig Kaiser. And as well as that, also, we have Raquel Gonzalez that's been called up. And now she's going to go by the name of Raquel Rodriguez. Personally, for me, let's start off with the name changes. Gunther was done earlier this year, so really not much more to say on that. I've covered that topic already. But Ludwig Kaiser, for me, not offended. I know that Twitter had a bit of a meltdown with both of the name changes on SmackDown this week, but for me personally, I think they're fine. If it's to do with like intellectual property, like they couldn't get Volta earlier this year, which is why they changed it to Gunther, same now what they've done with these names, whatever, I'm totally fine with it. And to be honest, really, I think Ludwig Kaiser is alright as a name. I was actually speaking to NXT, who's done a few videos on this channel previously from Jonesy Chats Wrestling, and he even said the idea if the names were reversed as Kaiser Ludwig, still think that would have been fine as well. But Ludwig Kaiser is what we have going forward. I think he was a good mouthpiece for Gunther as well this week, but we'll talk more about that in a couple of seconds, because Raquel Gonzalez now becoming Raquel Rodriguez for me is totally fine as well. Any relation to Ricardo? Probably not, but personally for me, it's just a minor name change. For me, it doesn't mean anything. It's not offensive at all. The way I can see where it would be offensive to some people would be the idea, of course, that they've been in NXT for all this time under one name. Now we've got the 2.0 moniker going as well. Why are we still changing people when we call them up? Well, they're still all coming from this era of black and gold, and I think that's the reason why a lot of those changes are still taking place. It's why it happened with Butch, it's why it's happened with others in the past. For me personally, with these ones, they still were around with black and gold NXT, so that's why I think some of the changes are necessary. If we start seeing it with people like Tony D'Angelo or Grayson Waller, like when they're called up, then I think there's a real issue and a real question of why we need to watch NXT 2.0, because then at that point, you've kind of freshened things up and made all these gimmick changes for them there, and there's no connection when they're called up. I can understand why there was this disconnect with black and gold NXT, because those were not groomed to the way that Vince McMahon wanted them when they were called to Raw and SmackDown. So for that reason, I understand those name changes. And plus, nothing is as bad as, well, for most people, Butch, but nothing will ever beat Doudrop for me. Awful, awful name. But going to how I think they will do on SmackDown going forward, I think we're going to be a success. I think all of them will do really, really well. Personally, for me, Gunther, he came in, of course, he's had everything changed, hasn't he, these days, but thankfully not the moveset. Yes, the music's changed, the name's changed, and the ring attire has changed, but he was still chopping and slapping people about. Ludwig Kaiser as well was the mouthpiece this week. I have seen in the rumor mill that they could be actually pushed as a tag team. For me personally, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I think Gunther could be a top main event star in WWE. Maybe he needs to earn the stripes to get to that position rather than being hot-shotted straight to the top. But either way, I think Gunther eventually will be one of the top names on SmackDown going forward. Think of the matches that he can have on that brand against Drew McIntyre, against Sheamus, against Roman Reigns. There's some big fights there that we cannot wait to see with Gunther going forward. The only thing that's missing from this package is Fabian Aichner. Now, I know that he was not brought up. I don't know the reasoning why he's not been brought up with this group. Is it Imperium no more? I'm not sure. I would do actually fear for Fabian Aichner as well, where he's going to be going forward, because I suppose the North American title picture could work quite well for him, perhaps in NXT with I don't know, a repackage or something? I don't know. They've obviously had him walk away from Marcel Bartel, or now Ludwig Kaiser this week on NXT for a reason. Perhaps maybe could even go back to NXT UK. I guess time will tell with that. As for Raquel Rodriguez, it's slow and steady. Yet not perhaps the most impactful start on SmackDown, kind of, rejecting the advances from Los Lotharios, but at the same time, I do sit there and think that she will be pushed when the time is right. I think that right now we've got the SmackDown Women's Championship picture of Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey. Now that's become the I Quit match. It's now confirmed for WrestleMania Backlash. Raquel is not going to be instantly thrown into the championship picture. I don't think she should be just immediately thrown into a tag team unless she was going to be somebody's bodyguard or something like that role, or if Dakota Kai had come up with her. So for me personally, it feels like she's going to be a babyface for this meantime. Feels like she's going to be a single star. Hopefully she'll get sort of a program with someone like a Shotzi or Natalya or Shayna Baszler. Perhaps work her way up as we get towards Money in the Bank season, SummerSlam. Maybe that would be the right time to start pushing her in and around the championship picture. So personally for me, I think all are going to do fine. The one that I would be most worried about would be Ludwig Kaiser on SmackDown going forward. But I mean, whether it's a tag team partner, whether it's a mouthpiece, whether it's the sidekick, and I hope, judging off this week of SmackDown, that he will be the sidekick for Gunther and perhaps do the matches that leads up to the pay-per-views for Gunther. Say we have him against Drew McIntyre. You do what you did say with like JBL back in the day. We had the cabinet and you had like Orlando Jordan going in and take the beating on the road to the pay-per-view. So if you have that role, that's not a bad role to have. It gets you a lot of TV time. So I think all of them will be successful personally on the whole. It's just interesting to see how it will play out. But I think we have to be patient. I think we have to be steady. And I think for goodness sakes, people just relax on the name changes. Yes, if it happens to the NXT 2.0, like ones that are coming in now later on, then have a moan about it. But these names, for me, they're not so bad. And yeah, I think there's a chance that all of these will have success on SmackDown going forward. Next question comes from Supersonic X. What are your thoughts on Lacey Evans' promo this week on SmackDown? I feel like we're seeing her backstory as a person, instead seeing her character as the sassy Southern Belle. You are indeed right, Supersonic X. We have got a transition here with Lacey Evans on her return to WWE. The sassy Southern Belle does appear to be no more, and we've got a much more real Lacey Evans presented on our screens. There wasn't a scripted promo by any stretch of the imagination. That felt 100% genuine. It felt 100% real. That is the Lacey Evans, and that is the experience that she has gone through in life, and some very sad circumstances that she's had growing up, and perhaps moving around a lot. And of course, she's taken all of those bad experiences and she's helped that groom her into the person that she is today. The fact is, like she said, she could fold, but she chooses to fight on. She chooses to represent her country, and she chooses now to be in WWE and to be a great role model for those people perhaps with going through experiences like that growing up. They can look up to this Lacey Evans. This is a character that can get over and can connect with people immediately. This is something that we should see perhaps a bit more of in WWE, in my opinion. The fact is of just this idea of, rather than being presented a character that doesn't fit the narrative, what people are like. Now, granted, I think the Sassy Southern Belle actually was a very underrated character. I don't think it was used to its full potential, but at the same time, to see this Lacey Evans, it's not even a character, it's an extension of her personality, and I think the fact that it's got much more realism to it, I think that's what's going to connect people in. We've got a part 2 to this story coming next week on Friday on SmackDown. I'm very much looking forward to it. I've seen there's been a lot of positive feedback as well throughout a lot of the wrestling sources that have been online, so let's see what it's going to lead to going forward. But I do think that Lacey Evans, she's going to connect with a lot of people with this, and I think that her career is going to go from strength to strength moving forward. A fantastic podcast, and I believe first time askers of our next question now. Clark Street Wrestling Podcast, how would you improve AEW viewership? Fantastic question, this one. There's a lot of layers to it as well, depending on what shows and if it's overall AEW, but I think to look at AEW as a whole, and you look at Dynamite, it's a very consistent show, it's a fun wrestling show, it's something that I think a lot of people speak highly and positive about in our wrestling community, so to not see it connect us with as many casuals, or perhaps getting the same ratings as WWE or even more at this point, there seems to be something that needs to go to an outer reach to get other people to come in. Yes, you can bring your CM Punks in, you can bring your Bryan Danielsons in, people like that, but it's still getting a hardcore demographic wrestling fan base. I don't think it's a mainstream audience that it's necessarily reaching out to, and I think that is the next level for AEW. They need to do something that's going to connect them with a mainstream audience. It's kind of interesting I say this because we see the idea of Tony Khan and Jim Ross being at UFC last night, that sort of thing being pointed out in the crowd. that sort of thing may get a couple of eyes going, oh, there's another wrestling promotion, we'll go and check that out. But maybe another thing that could be good is to get one of your wrestlers and to actually make them a mainstream global star. You look at WWE from the past, they managed to get characters over like The Rock, and now who's taken over Hollywood, John Cena, who's, you know, gone on to go on a similar path. Now, if AEW can create someone like that, who can get over with a mainstream, a casual audience outside of things, then AEW will not only grow just a little bit, they will go and compete with the big leagues of WWE and perhaps even go and match with what's going ratings-wise. That's what they're missing. They're missing one or two real big top global stars that they can present to everybody, because right now everyone on that roster, as talented as they are, as great as they are, as good as the stories are, and everything that goes into that TV show each and every week, because it's my favourite 2 hours of television watching Dynamite at the moment on a weekly basis. They just need something that's going to bring other people in than a hardcore wrestling fan base. That is the transition and the change, and arguably it's saying more sports entertainment if you want to bring some outsiders in. We'll have to wait and see. But to go, we're just on a little bit of side projects as well, because there were a couple of other topics that you could talk about, AEW viewership, Rampage being one of them. I think Rampage in recent months, as much as it's a fun show to watch, another one of my favourite wrestling shows to watch on a weekly basis, I would say that it's kind of skippable been of late. It's not been, you know, it's where it's pre-recorded after Dynamite and some of the matches that we're getting. Alright, it's great to see, you know, Swerve Strickland against a QT Marshall, or, you know, any of those sort of matches, but I can skim them. I don't need to see them. I know the results before going in. There's no real grip and need for me to have to watch Rampage. This past week, though, Rampage, Wheeler Yuta against John Moxley, that's one of the matches of the year. I can't miss that. So anyone that's heard about this match afterwards knows they have to go back and check that out. They need big matches that are going to get over big time. Obviously, big names as well help. Having a John Moxley on this show and a Bryan Danielson on the show does help with the AEW sort of hardcore fan base to match the ratings of a Dynamite, because that's what I think Rampage needs to aim to do at this stage, rather than a bigger market, if you want. But if they put a lot of their big matches on Rampage going forward, that would help. And obviously they're going to address that by having a live Rampage this upcoming week. They've got the World Championship on the line, Hangman Adam Page against Adam Cole. That should make you know, a bit of a difference with the ratings going forward, because live, anything can happen. Gives you that excitement, gives you that buzz. It's a world title match, it's a Texas death match, so I mean, you know, it's ticking a lot of the boxes. It's two of your big stars in your company, so hopefully it will get closer to a Dynamite rating than what we've seen recently with a Rampage rating. But if they continue to do things like that, Rampage should improve. And I'm going to give a little shout out to Battle of the Belts as well. What is the point of Battle of the Belts? I've got no interest in watching that show whatsoever. Yes, look, Thunder Rosa versus Nyla Rose should be a really good match, but we have got the world title on the line the night before, on when you got Battle of the Belts on the Saturday. You got the tag titles on the line on Dynamite on the Wednesday. I believe they did championship matches like this the last time we did Battle of the Belts, so I don't see the point of Battle of the Belts on the Saturday at this particular moment. Like I said, it's nothing against the match that has been announced for this show. It's the fact that the other title matches are taking place on different shows. I thought that was the whole point of Battle of the Belts. So for me, all in all, is to make each show mean something, feel that you have to watch it to begin with, and obviously then to create some big global stars. Once they do that, then viewership, we're not just talking now Rampage and Battle of the Belts, we're talking Dynamite, essentially will grow and go even higher to 1.5, 2 million viewers each and every week. Next, we've got Scott Retro Wrestling in house, and he's got two questions for us. Usually I take one, but I'll do two for this week. Considering that Sammy Guevara and Conti got booed out of the building, do you feel a heel turn is coming? And also, if I could add 2 more members to the Blackpool Combat Club, who would they be? However, one of them has to be a female. Great questions, these ones. Yeah, Sammy Guevara and Conti, since becoming a couple, they've got a lot of heat on social media. Look, to be fair, that's their personal lives, that's for them to get on with, and if they're happy together, that's all that matters. That's nobody else's business. But as presented now as a couple on TV, sometimes it's tricky business doing this with couples on TV. It's very hard for people to sort of get on board with seeing it. It's very different to the days of the Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth, where everyone saw that as like the darling couple back in the 80s and early 90s. These days, you even saw it in WWE with Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch. Fans don't seem to connect to it as much. It seems very cringy in this modern day and age. So I think that's one of the reasons it doesn't quite get over. I think as well, I just feel that both of them together seem to have natural heel heat. They seem quite cocky and quite arrogant when they're presented on TV. So is a heel turn coming? I'll be honest, looking at the way that storylines are playing out, I don't think so in the near future, but I do think it's something that they should consider. For me personally, I do think that they could be like the Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford of 2022. That was what I think they wanted with that duo before, but couldn't quite get over the same way with the natural heel heat. I think Sammy and Tay have that in them to really get booed and out of the building and sort of be really, really disliked. If you ask my personal opinion, and I mentioned Battle of the Belts a few moments ago, I think Sammy Guevara and Scorpio Sky will be the TNT Championship match that will take place on that show. I think that's what they're building to, and perhaps even a mixed tag team match. I could see Sammy and Tay going against Sky and Paige. Of course, Paige recently from American Top Team joining AEW as well. Seems to have that feud going on to take Conti. So I think they'll probably do that first. I still think we could get a Sammy Guevara versus Chris Jericho feud as well in the very near future. But after that, yeah, I mean, I definitely would turn Sammy Guevara and take Conti heel. It feels that fans are turning on them. Fans are not really on side of this. So, you know, use it to the advantage. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're seeing them sort of giving sort of a bit of heel tactics on social media. Just play with it into storylines. I think just ditch all what they're doing. Keep Sky the champion for the time being, have him lose the belt to someone else somewhere further down the line, and just get these two being heels. I do think this act will get over a lot more. As for the Blackpool Combat Club, of course, that we've got with William Regal, Bryan Danielson, as well as Jon Moxley, we've seen what it takes to join this group. Wheeler Yuta, wow, a star was made overnight. That was incredible, that match. And just even from the kickoff, you just felt the energy in the building, and the fact that Jon Moxley couldn't even do his proper entrance. He was, you know, given the suicide dive to just kick things off. Yuta was just bleeding throughout that match as well. That was just incredible stuff to see, and of course Yuta just wouldn't give up. He wouldn't be pinned, he wouldn't be submitted. He had to pass out in the end and eventually got that handshake. So you see what it is to join the club here, what people need to go through. My next choice for you would be Lee Moriarty. It was a name that was dropped before. I think that would be very interesting to see how he would be amongst this dynamic. You know, he was had an incredible match as well recently with Bryan Danielson. So to see if he was to get that same rub with Jon Moxley, that would be quite cool as well. And it seems that whoever joins this group does need to bleed. An alternative name, just to say quickly on the men's side before I give you a female name, could be Daniel Garcia, just purely because then you could start a feud with them against the Jericho Appreciation Society, the pro wrestlers versus the sports entertainers. That's a storyline I really want to see play out at some point on AEW television. I think it'd be a lot of fun to watch. But to go into a female name, and she's just really hit the radar, to be honest, in the last sort of week or two. I wasn't too familiar with her work before Ring of Honor, Supercard of Honor, but seeing her on that show and seeing her as well on Rampage this week, I think Willow deserves an opportunity. I think she would be a great shout for this group. As I say, it's a bit of a disconnect of how she would necessarily join the group, because if you've got to wrestle both of the guys and show that you're technically based and, you know, can bleed with them first, I think you'd have to find a different avenue to get her involved. But she's shown she can wrestle. If she can show that aggressive side as well, maybe she'd be a really good fit for this group. And she seems like someone you could build a division around. So yeah, Willow would be my shout on the female side. Let's move things back over to WWE for our next question now. We've got Mike Tanhabs Mike asking, how would you book a potential Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns feud? And if so, when should McIntyre win either the WWE or Universal Championship? Great question, this one, and always fun to do a bit of fantasy booking. Personally for me, though, I think realistically Drew McIntyre needs to start putting his name back in the hat to go for the top championships. He's been out of the title scene for a long time now, and personally, every match and feud that Drew McIntyre's in, it feels quite obvious with the result, because Drew McIntyre is still presented as a top guy, but going against mid-carders and lower mid-carders, you know, it only does so much for the story. They become a bit uninteresting after a while because, you know, Drew McIntyre is going over. So for me personally, I think the name needs to go back in the hat. And I would actually say, make the shot now. Go for it. And, you know, Shinsuke Nakamura going against Roman Reigns can be a TV feud. We don't need to have that on WrestleMania Backlash, in my personal opinion. I'd even do it next week on SmackDown. That's a great way to bump a rating for a SmackDown, because Roman Reigns competing on a weekly TV show is something that we don't see very often. It's an attraction. It's a championship match. It's a big deal. Even against Shinsuke Nakamura, which will be a great match. For me, I think it will be a better match than storyline. So for me personally, I then have Drew McIntyre defeat Sami Zayn this next week on SmackDown. Sami run away last week. Don't have him run away this week. Maybe he tries to get DQ'd, then we restart the match again, and then it's no countouts, no disqualifications, and Drew McIntyre wins that. It almost becomes anything goes once again. That gives Sami Zayn something more to moan about going forward. But going back to the point in hand of Drew McIntyre winning that match, you can declare that he wants to go for Roman Reigns. He's waited long enough. But what I'd have as well is I'd have Roman Reigns say, look, to be fair, Drew, I faced you at Survivor Series back in 2020. We had that match. It was champion versus champion at the time when we both had one belt. and I beat you. And you can see since then, you now have no titles. I now have 2 titles. Like, you know, really cocky, head of the table stuff. Roman is that arrogant. He's believing now that any superstar one-on-one, it's a foregone conclusion. He can beat them. It's like, you might as well start putting 2 people against me because I can stack them, I can pin them, and I will still walk away as your unified Universal Champion. And I think that is the key there, which can bring Adam Pearce in just to bring things in. Because although I think Drew McIntyre should be in the hat, I don't think you should give your big match away straight away the singles match. So what I would do is to say, well, yeah, you have both belts. You reckon you can beat both, you know, 2 superstars at once? Well, how about the fact that you're on both shows going forward, Roman? We give you 1 superstar from Raw to face and 1 superstar from SmackDown to face. But instead of doing 2 matches on one night, let's have a triple threat match, and we can put both belts on the line. And the person from Raw that then I would bring in would be Seth freaking Rollins. And the reason I would do that is purely based on the fact that Seth faced Roman at the Rumble. Seth won that match. Yeah, it was by disqualification, but Seth did win the match. Roman hasn't been pinned since 2019, but the last time he lost a singles match was at the Royal Rumble. So we have Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, and Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship. So Roman can get out of this premium live event still with both belts. He can pin Seth Rollins. Drew McIntyre wasn't involved in the decision, but just to break things up, because I think the ultimate destination should be later in the year. We've got SummerSlam coming up. We've got the rumored UK pay-per-view at the start of September. That's the area we need to look for as the destination. So for me, what I would do, we took him at the start of the video, and I've actually said this in the fantasy booking video already, I bring Gunther into the mix. I would have him take out Drew McIntyre. The fact that Drew thinks he's gone through lots of people, he's ready for the championship, he's not gone through Gunther. So we can have a big, European battle, let's just say, of Drew McIntyre versus Gunther for a couple of shows through Hell in a Cell and Money in the Bank. Drew McIntyre getting his win at Money in the Bank, putting that feud behind him, and then he can focus on SummerSlam one-on-one against the head of the table, the Tribal Chief of Roman Reigns, who still holds both belts at this point, I may add. Drew can make the point, of course, that he wasn't pinned in the triple threat match early on, so, you know, he is actually good for go for both belts. No one from the Raw side at that point really seems to be up to scratch to where they can take on Roman Reigns. So, you know, Roman takes this match one-on-one. Drew gets his one-on-one opportunity. Seems like the fair thing to do. Like we said, we can have a screwy finish at SummerSlam, and then of course with that screw finish we kind of get the idea then of what we can do with Roman walking away with both championships, but perhaps say Drew wins by DQ, same as what we did at the Rumble, and then we can build that towards the UK pay-per-view. And I think that we have had major title changes on UK pay-per-views before. We had it with AJ Styles beating Jinder Mahal back in, I believe, was 2017 if I'm not mistaken, that's nearly 5 years ago, believe it or not. And then of course we can then go with the idea of having them two face at this UK premium live event. Drew McIntyre wins the gold, and I think that would be pretty awesome to see, the fact that Drew this time around wasn't beaten by the Tribal Chief. In every turn he had previously when they wrestled at WrestleMania 35 and other shows, Roman's always been the guy that could come out on top, and we can always play that storyline as well, that Roman's always had Drew's number. Play that here, build it up this time round. Drew isn't defeated, but is delayed to his position, and then when he finally gets that one-on-one big match, he picks up the victory, but doesn't get the belts, do it a second time round, and then he wins the championship. So Roman Reigns then can perhaps hopefully focus to WrestleMania 39, where hopefully we can have Roman versus The Rock, because that's a match I really want to see. I want The Rock to come back one more time, and personally, if they ever do that match, doesn't need championships involved, in my opinion. Drew could carry the flag all the way to WrestleMania 39, perhaps even taking on someone like a Cody Rhodes on that show. Next question comes from Martin Lorenzo Carrillo. What minor/major changes do you think Madcap Moss needs to be a top babyface in WWE now that he has turned on Happy Corbin? I think we've seen this day coming for a little while now, haven't we? The split between Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss. But what I really thought was going to happen when these two broke up was I just thought Happy Corbin would destroy Madcap Moss. But you can see in the last week, WWE does have faith in Madcap Moss to be a single star on his own, because, well, in previous times, Madcap Moss was being pretty good in Battle Royals and Royal Rumble situations. He eliminated AJ Styles in the Royal Rumble this year. He's won the Andre the Giant Battle Royal, so he seems to have his own form of gimmick match that he seemed good in, and now that he sort of broke off with Happy Corbin, well, he decided to put down Happy Corbin in the jokes when the other jokes weren't funny. This one wasn't overly funny either, but it was something that got over with the crowd anyway to get on his side, and he won the fight, which of course, if you're going to be a babyface and you want to get over, babyfaces usually can't fight. I don't know if you've noticed that on WWE TV. They try to fight and they always get beat down by the heel. Madcap Moss hasn't magically lost the art of how to fight, so the fact he got the better of Happy Corbin in this situation, I think really got the crowd on side very, very early. And of course, if Madcap Moss is someone that can win this rivalry, that's a great start to pushing him as a single star in WWE, whether it's the mid-card or even if you want to start having bigger dreams and aspirations to get him towards the top of the card. I do think we're going to get cringy humour, John Cena style jokes going forward from Madcap Moss, but hey, it worked for John Cena, maybe it could work for Madcap Moss. Maybe get rid of those bloody suspenders. I think they're a bit weird. He's digging Happy Corbin's wardrobe, and to be fair, his wardrobe isn't much better. But hey, you know, with minor tweaks, I think Madcap Moss can actually get over and actually can be successful in WWE. The guy is a good in-ring talent. Let's not get around that. And he's been shown his opportunities with faith in matches against Drew McIntyre earlier this year, twice on pay-per-view, or premium live events, I should say. Of course, once being at Day 1, and of course the second one being at Elimination Chamber. I would not be surprised at this point if Madcap Moss versus Happy Corbin does take place at WrestleMania Backlash. If that's the case, then if I'm not mistaken, Madcap Moss in some format would be featured on every premium live event this year. The only one he wouldn't have a match on would be WrestleMania, but of course he did have a big impact in that WrestleMania match, arguably causing a distraction which would have cost Happy Corbin getting the victory. But no, I'm interested to see what it's going to be going forward. I'd like to know everyone else's thoughts in the comments below. Does Madcap Moss have it in him to be a top guy in WWE? I'm not sure about top guy personally, but mid to upper mid card, and SmackDown is in dire need of babyfaces, so for that alone, I think Madcap Moss does stand a chance. Next question coming from our YouTube comment section. We've got Jeff Samuel in the house asking, if WWE end the brand split, what would I do and what would I want WWE to do in my opinion? Also, with the tag team championships going to be unified, what would I do? Who would I put in there in the match? And would I want to see a new design? Well, let's talk about those tag team unifications because they are quite key into how I would end the brand split first. Obviously, Roman Reigns then signaling the Usos to go for RK Bro to go and win the Raw Tag Team Championships. If those belts are going to be unified, it feels in the short term it's about being the belt collector 2022. We've seen Kenny Omega do it before in AEW with other promotions. We've seen Deonna Purrazzo now being the champ. Well, Roman now seems to want to take over WWE's entire championship collection, having both Raw and SmackDown championships as a part of the collection. So if the Usos can get those tag team championships from RK Bro, I think that would make a lot of sense. And they are the two best booked tag teams in WWE right now. It feels like it's the natural storyline progression to do this, in my personal opinion. Of course, if they were to do that, they'd carry all the gold and carry all the belts. But eventually, if you're going to end the brand split, I would like them to be made into one design. Perhaps Roman would then say, look, we're that good, we're beating people on Raw, we're beating people on SmackDown, we are the unified champions, and rather than carrying all this belt around, it's getting so heavy, let's just have one championship design for, you know, one championship for the world title and then for the tag titles. You can try and see the maps going as well for the mid-card titles as well if they want to really have all the collection there. For the women's championships, personally for me, I would do that match as well. I'd save that for a big marquee for like a SummerSlam. I do think when it comes around to that, you'd have Ronda Rousey versus Bianca Belair. I think that would be a main event pay-per-view level match if you were to do that. But to come along and say how would I actually end the brand split, I would try and just wear ease where you have these championships merged together, people being on both shows and getting excuses for other superstars to jump to the other show to try and get revenge. So for example, say Roman Reigns is in a feud with Drew McIntyre like we spoke about earlier in this video, and Roman Reigns is on Raw, he's done something dastardly on SmackDown to Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre needs to revenge. For some reason, Drew McIntyre then needs to invade Raw. So that way you're blurring the lines, you're making the brand split mean less and less. You can start having super shows as well from week to week basis, and you can try and just bring things together to end the brand split. Now personally for me, if I was really fancy booking this, I, back in the old days, would have loved to have done a Raw versus SmackDown brand invasion war kind of storyline, which could have gone on for years to then ultimately bring everyone back together. You know, we could have done almost like the how they did with the invasion angle of WWE and WCW, but instead of making it last for 6 months, you could easily make that go on for years. But at the same time, I digress. If that's how you're going to do it with the championships here, you merge them, you kind of blur the lines of what the brand split actually means, to the point of when these super shows happen, to the point the decision is made from the upper ups that hey, we just have everybody under one roof because we can't keep control of what's going on. I think if you create a chaos mindset that anything can happen in WWE, it creates excitement, it creates buzz. So that's kind of how I think I would do it to do that. But then what I would do is, rather than sort of doing the traditional WWE tactic of saying, right, okay, well, we've merged the rosters into one, we're going to use half of the superstars on both shows and overexpose them and exaggerate everything, I would still use everybody, but just you have more matches available, but try and get everyone on one show a week. You know, take a Ricochet, for example. One week he's competing on Raw, defending the Intercontinental title, and next week he's defending it on SmackDown. You know, you just have that where you can use people and use it correctly rather than just, you know, overexposing people, because that's probably the fear of what we've got right now, and it's an experiment, I think, at this point. Roman Reigns being on Raw and SmackDown, same with the Usos, and of course, if it can go well, where it doesn't get overexposed, it's going to keep people like Fox and USA happy because they've got the top stars on both shows, and I think that would be the reasoning why I think WWE deep down would want to end the brand split. They arguably don't have enough star power on SmackDown as it is. That roster seems wafer thin. It's been helped a little bit this week with the, you know, introductions of Gunther and Raquel Rodriguez and of course Ludwig Kaiser, but still, it's still lacking. And I think Raw, even though it has more star power, I think, you know, matches can get a bit stale very quickly. They haven't got enough depth in the divisions. Take the tag team division, take the mid-card divisions. They are still very sort of thin in WWE. So to bring everyone under one roof probably isn't the worst idea in the world, but it's how it's done and put together. But to have new designs for championships, personally I'm fine with that. I think that'd be quite cool. I think actually if they were to redo Raw and SmackDown as well, where it was kind of a situation where, you know, everyone was under one roof, to at least make you feel like you're watching a different show, I would change the set designs as well. And hey, I'm going to pray for it. I want the SmackDown fist back, but of course we'll probably just get it in CGI format just like we've got it now. And our last question this week coming from Jake Michael, asking if AJ Styles was to form a faction with anybody from NXT, Raw and SmackDown, who would I have in there? And do I think the 24 title needs to be more serious? Who would I put on the title to make it more serious? And should they perhaps switch it to a women's mid-card title belt with a new name and design? Fun questions, these ones. AJ Styles, of course, he's now going against Edge in a rivalry. Edge has teamed up with Damian Priest. There are rumours that Edge will have a faction. If AJ was to counter this faction, well, first off, I've already suggested in my fantasy booking of how I'd book WrestleMania Backlash that perhaps Finn Balor could come and align himself with AJ Styles. Of course, they have history of being part of the Bullet Club in Japan. Of course, not necessarily at the same time, but still have both been a part of that. So there is that connection there. And of course, looking at Japan as well, I mean, AJ Styles has a lot of history there. Why not bring Kushida up from NXT? That would get him away from jacket time and being the, you know, modern day Kai-En-Tai, because Kushida is much better than that and could be treated a lot more seriously in WWE. So for me, Kushida would be the alternative, because I mean previously AJ Styles has gone for, like, you know, big bodyguards like Omos. He's had, you know, Farley, of course, in New Japan as well as his bodyguards when he's been heel. But Babyface, I think he would probably go for people more his size, technical based, people that he feels he could trust. And I think Balor and Kushida would be two choices that I think would be sensible ones for AJ to make to go in this battle against Edge and his new form of ministry/brood. As for the 24/7 Championship, it's a bit of comic relief. The problem is WWE doesn't always do the comic stuff well. But hey, I would keep it as it is. It is like the modern day hardcore championship. We have serious championships in WWE. If it was another serious title, again, it still wouldn't be taken seriously, I don't feel. So I'd keep it as it is. I just would try and be a bit more creative with it. You know, try and be a bit more outdoors with it, different environments and stuff. We're probably now going to have the wedding environment again with this, which of course could be interesting when they eventually do this with Dana Brooke and Reggie, and of course with Tozawa and Tamina. Are the weddings going to be at the same time? I don't even know at this point, but hey, how it will play out will be how it will play out. But as for a women's mid-card championship, I'm going to take a quote from Mr. Tom Colohue here, and he says that we have women's mid-card championships. They're called the Women's Tag Team Championships, and of course WWE have struggled to book them very, very well over the first few years. They've always had teams and broke them up quickly and not really had a in-depth division of teams. So for me personally, until I can see that that's been booked correctly, I wouldn't want to see elsewhere. And just to add my own take on top of it as well, we have a Raw Women's Champion and a SmackDown Women's Champion. If there is a day that those belts are combined and merged, then I consider perhaps could be a slight benefit for a mid-card championship, someone like Liv Morgan, to hold that on the build to becoming a women's champion. But in the meantime, I think there are enough women's championships to go around in WWE. But that's all we've got time for this week. Thank you everyone for your questions as always. Before I do leave today, I need to give a big thank you to C Nation Dog on YouTube. Did a video of 5 reasons why SCW is awesome. Thank you so much. It was very kind of you to do that video. Honestly, very chuffed by watching it, and recommend everyone to go and support C Nation Dog on YouTube as well. Go and subscribe to his channel. And of course, if you get a chance, do check out that video as well. It's very kind of you. It's very nice to see so many supportive people here in the wrestling community doing YouTube content, and of course, yeah, it's very nice to do that, so thank you very, very much. But more videos will be dropping on SCW through the week, and of course there are lots of videos for you to go and check out in the meantime, so make sure to go and do that. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell as well. Send the notification to all, each and every time a new video is released. As I say, videos are popping up on your screen right now, so make sure to go and check them out. I look forward to interacting with you in the comment section on any topics we've had today, and of course, if you want to do a question for next week's episode, then leave the hashtag AskSCW with your question in the comment section of this video, and I will include it in the next one. Thanks for watching. Take care. Have yourselves a great day. You've been watching SCW here on YouTube. All the best.